KWT slaying.
Greetings, Israel. This is another teaching by Teo Ministries. So today we're going to talk about the Father's name, Yah, Yahweh, Yahuwah. What is his name? Do we have any evidence that can lead us to what his name is? Okay, now we're going to look into some evidence provided to us by a book titled Hebrewisms of West Africa. If that is not part of your library, I highly recommend it. It's a very good read. I would say one thing. Now, this is not getting on those who use the Yiddish brew language, but the Yiddish brew is a pet peeve of mine, so I'm just putting it out there, right? So, if you watch our teachings, we lean toward the Hebrew being actually of the Bantu language, right? And all the information that we put together. I actually did a video on similarities of the Bantu language with the Hebrew language, but I had some audio problems with it, so most of you probably haven't seen it. So I may have to redo that since I'm doing this video. But it is documented that the Bantu language has many similarities. So I have pet peeves with words like mishpoha, and I know a lot of people use it, but okay, that's Turkish origin that comes from Europe, that comes from Yiddish, right? Mishpoha, even words like Ruach HaKodesh, right? That is not Hebrew, that is Yiddish brew. Okay, Yah HaKodesh, even Shalom. Right, that is Yiddish brew, right? The more accurate is probably salama, right? Used by the Arabs, used by the East African Jews, the Falasha, used by many South African groups as a piece, right? Salama. So if you notice, we've used that, but mishpoha is not something black folks say. That's my pet peeve. Not getting on you guys. I won't get on you if you use it, but it's not our language. Okay. So this is the symbol of the Father's name. It's often translated by modern scholars as Yahweh, and some scholars as Yahuwah, right? But after reading Hebrewisms of West Africa, there's another name you should consider. Now, in the Bantu world, you'll see some brothers online, they use the name Nzambi. And even though you can't really tie that back to, what we find in the Gentile translations, right? Like Yah, I've been seeking Yah, Yahweh, something close to that, to see where the translation ties come in, right? And then in Zombie is really not close at all. I'm not saying it's not related, because I'll show you why it is. But as far as the original language, I think it's closer to the Ashanti language or the Akan people. And So this could be translated, and you'll see why, as Yami. Okay, and Yami is the god of the Akan people of Ghana, right? This is part of their language, and it means he who knows and sees everything, and omniscient, omnipotent, right? The everlasting God. There's even a translation that refers to him as the one that's highest of all, the most high, right? So we're going to get into that some more. We're going to look at the book Hebrewisms of West Africa, and we're going to see what we can find. But let's continue. So before we get into Hebrewisms of West Africa, we're going to look at this writing, the Gifford Lectures, over 100 years of lectures on natural theology, chapter 5, worship of the sky in Africa. Okay, so here, I wanted to read this to you. Among the Shanti, the sky god Yami, Anyami, or Yami, the N is silent, is the greatest of the gods. The same name of the god is known to many widely separated tribes. Among the Twi-speaking people, the Ashanti are by far the most powerful and the most famous. They regard the sky and earth as their two great deities. But unlike the tribes of Upper Senegal, they rank the sky above the earth. He is indeed the greatest of their gods, the supreme beings. Now, they only have one God, but this is the Gentiles translating it like this. His name is, in the Twi language, is Anyami, the shining one, shortened into Yami, or lengthened into Anyakopan or Yakopan. These names are applied both to the deity and to the sky. The Twi Negro conceives of the visible sky as animated. The firmament is, as it were, the body, or at least the abode of the deities, who is its soul. It is remarkable that the same name for the deity occurs in the languages of widely separated tribes of the Bantu stock in Western Africa. Thus, the Douala, it is Yambi. In the language of Angola, it is Nzambi or Zambi. In Herero, it is Ndayambi. And similar names occur in many intermediate languages. In the language of the Gas of the Gold Coast, the name both of the sky and of the sky god is Yanmo. So they have different variations of the name among the Bantu tribes, but they all have the same deity. All of them describe him as the omnipotent one, the all-knowing, invisible God, right? And that he's holy, he's perfect, and without error and without sin. That's their God, and that's how they describe it. So we're going to look at Hebrewisms of West Africa and see what they have to say. One other thing. You definitely want to read Hebrewisms of West Africa, because they explain to you that the majority of people are in Jamaica are of basically two groups, and it could, I guess it could be, vary, but it's primarily Ashanti and Igbo among the Jamaicans, and the French and the Spanish actually really were concerned about bringing the Akan people over to Jamaica, because they were stronger. They were very strong, and they were very good fighters, and they didn't take slavery well, so they constantly rebelled and killed a lot of Europeans. So, but they took them anyway because they were very strong. But it was interesting to note that most of Jamaica are of the Ashanti, according to Hebrewisms. Now, we're not going to talk about that, but it's worth reading. It's a very good book. So let's continue. So in chapter 3 of Hebrewisms of West Africa, the supreme being of the Shanti, we're going to discuss this. Now, I'm going to start here with the assertion of Ellis, because we're going to deal with this up front so that these UA people won't say, hey, look, Ellis said that they took this from the Europeans or from the Christians. But Rattray lived among the Ashanti over, I think, 11 years, and he refutes this guy. And actually, Ellis recants his statement later, but Ellis's statement is more popular because it took root over the years when he first stated that. But let's get into it. So the assertion of Ellis. On all questions pertaining to the Ashanti, no authority is more widely quoted than that of the late Sir Alfred Burton Ellis, who was for many years an officer in a colored West India regiment that alternated usually at 3-year intervals between the Gold Coast and Jamaica. It is a little surprising then to find Sir Alfred making the unqualified assertion that the concept of a supreme being in the mind of the Ashanti was entirely due to the influence of Christianity and was unknown previous to the advent of missionary. In other words, that the traditions of the Ashanti as a tribe preclude a supreme being, and that their native religion was circumscribed by polytheism and fetishism. After quoting from Professor Wise to the effect that the original form of all religion is a raw, unsympathetic polytheism. Okay, hold on, lost my place. Ellis adopts the opinion as his own and enunciates the thesis that in the case of the Negro of the Gold Coast, all the deities are of the earth and their worship is born of fear of some possible ill or of a desire of some possible good. Under the caption General Deities, Ellis further evolves his theory as follows. Among the northern tribes of the Gold Coast, Negroes, which classification includes the Ashanti, the highest deity generally worshipped he calls Tondo, a preternatural, not a supernatural being. Intercourse with the European in time led to the introduction of a new deity named Nana Yakopan, the Lord of the Sky. This god of the Christians had no temple and no priesthood. The Negro mind classified him with their own deities in a way, but conceived him as altogether too distant and too indifferent to interfere directly in the affairs of the world. Okay. This Nana Yakopan, frequently styled merely as Yankopan, according to Ellis, gradually became regarded as the lord over the local deities. To the anger of Yakopan was also ascribed, let me readjust this. To the anger of Yakopan was also ascribed the thunder and lightning, the tornado, and the flood. To these were added special attributes, the result of their contact with Europeans. Thus, smallpox and famine came to be regarded as Yakopan's own special modes of displaying anger. Ellis then continues, within the last 20 or 30 years, the German missionaries sent out from time to time by the mission societies of Basel and Bremen have made Yakopan known to European ethnologists and students of the science of religion, but being unaware of the real origin of the god, they have generally spoken and written of him as a conception of a native mind, whereas he is really a god borrowed from Europeans and only thinly disguised. Hence, some scholars have expressed surprise that the Negro tribes of the Gold Coast should have progressed so much further in their religious development than many other people occupying positions higher in the scale of civilization, as to have formed a conception of a quasi-omnipotent God residing in the heavens instead of upon the earth and approachable by sacrifice. Finding many points of similarity between the Jehovah of the Jews and Yakupan, the missionaries have made use of the latter name to express the word God in their sermons and discourses, thus reversing the process which the natives had themselves performed some 2 or 3 centuries earlier. But to the native mind, Yakupan is a material and tangible being, possessing a body, legs, arms, in fact, all the limbs and the senses and faculties of man. He is also believed to have passions similar to those of men. This, however, is but natural, and to the uncultured mind, the concept of immaterial being is impossible. So Ellis is is a European, and they have their prejudices and basically are racist, right? But Rattray, being honest to the culture and to his experience and research, has a refutation. So refutation of Rattray. Shortly before the World War, R. Sutherland Rattray, the Ashanti District Commissioner, published a volume of Ashanti proverbs, and while giving due credit to Ellis for what the latter had accomplished, he seriously took exception to his viewpoint as regards the Ashanti concept of a supreme being. Citing the very passage just quoted from Ellis, he objects. The writer can hardly allow these statements to remain unchallenged, as careful research has seemed to him so totally to disprove them. Now, the first credentials the present writer would ask of anyone who was advancing an opinion as the result of independent research into native customs and beliefs such as this would be the state of proficiency that the investigator had acquired in the language of the people whose religion and beliefs he was attempting to reveal. The standard we would ask would be a high one. Had the investigator real colloquial knowledge of the language of the people whose inner soul he was endeavoring to lay bare? Such a knowledge as is gained only after years of arduous study and close intercourse, a knowledge that will enable the possessor to exchange jokes and quips and current slang, and to join in a discourse in which some dozen voices are all yelling at once. Such a knowledge of a language is a very different thing from an academic acquaintance with it, which might fit the possessor to write an excellent grammar, dictionary, or some other treatise. Judged by such a standard, the late Major Ellis must have been found wanting. 9 years later, the same author, who during the war had become a captain in His Majesty's service, published another volume entitled Ashanti, wherein he returns to the same subject. After styling Sir Alfred Ellis our great authority upon the region, he cites again the passage already mentioned and then continues. I quoted the above extract in a previous work, and therein stated at some length that I wholly disagree with the opinion and statement of Ellis upon this particular subject. Further research embodying a much fuller investigation into Ashanti religious beliefs than was before possible has only served to strengthen the opinion which I formerly expressed. It is surprising to find that Ellis, who, considering his many difficulties in working with an interpreter, made such good use on the whole of his opportunities, was so greatly misled with regard to such an important question. He was, moreover, a close student of Bosman, whom he constantly quotes, but he appears to have missed or ignored what the Dutchman wrote upon this subject more than 150 years before those German missionaries ever set foot upon the coast. Bosman says, It is really the more to be lamented that the Negroes idolize such worthless nothings, by reason that several amongst them have no very unjust idea of the deity, for they ascribe to the God the attribute of omnipresence, omniscience, and invisibility. Besides which they believe that he governs all things by providence. By reason, God is invisible, they say. It would be absurd to make any corporal representation of him. Wherefore they have such multitudes of images of their idol gods, which they take to be subordinate deities to the supreme God. So Israel was always worshiping false gods and integrating their worship of Yah with false gods, right? And only believe these are mediators betwixt God and men, which they take to be their idols. Now, I want to say this is a very excellent book because it also gets into the Shanti and show you how the Ashanti's cultures and traditions are tied to what we see in the Bible for the Hebrews. And one image you guys are probably familiar with is the sketching of the guy with the high priest emblem on his chest with the 12 Jews representing the 12 tribes, right? That's in here as well. And he shows that comparison. So this is a must-have book, actually, if you're interested in our history and how it all ties together. So how accurate in some respects Bozeman's statement will be clear from an examination of the religious ceremonies which are here recorded. Partial retractions. In due course, Ellis himself acknowledged that his position was untenable. But as so often happens in similar cases, the original assertion has been broadcast and quoted innumerable times, while the retraction has been for the most part ignored. 3 years after his earlier volume, Ellis returned to the question in his Ewe-speaking peoples, and while treating of Mawu, stated, while upon the subject of this God, I may as well say that, from additional evidence I have since collected, I now think that the view I expressed concerning the origin of Yakupan, the parallel God of the Twi-speaking people, was incorrect, and that instead of his being the Christian God borrowed and thinly disguised, I now hold he is like Mawu, the sky god, or indwelling spirit of the sky, and that also like Mawu he has been to a certain extent confounded with Jehovah. But even here, of course, he does not give him the full rating of a supreme being. This modification of Ellis's view detracts nothing from the stand of Captain Rattray. In fact, it only confirms the justness of his criticism. For had Ellis enjoyed a conversational knowledge of the languages that he was treating through means of an interpreter, he would scarcely have made the blunder he did in the first place. So Ellis was using an interpreter. Rattray could speak the language and communicate with the people of Ashanti, or the Ashanti. So Rattray had professional experience using their language. He spent 11 years interacting with them and their culture, and he concluded that this is the God of the Bible, or highly probable. Okay, so let's continue. The Captain Rattray personally is fully qualified to judge in the matter, even according to severe conditions that he has himself set down as a norm. In rejecting Ellis as a competent witness, there can be no question. Not only is he a master of the Shanti language and an official interpreter in several other dialects, but his many years among the Ashanti and kindred peoples have familiarized him with their mode of thought and have enabled him to win the unreserved confidence of the Negro, which in turn has gained for him admission to their most hidden ceremonies, and has unlocked the secret of the Queen Mothers, who have freely satisfied his every inquiry. As a matter of justice, the very title of our great authority, our great authority upon the region, which in his modesty he has so graciously yielded to Ellis, and all truth belongs to Captain R. Sutherland Rattray himself and no other. So Rattray is the expert in Ashanti culture, not Ellis. Now let's get into the supreme being of the Ashanti. Great weight then must be given to Captain Rattray's statement. I am convinced that the conception in the Ashanti mind of a supreme being has nothing whatsoever to do with the missionary influence, nor is it to be ascribed to contact with Christians or even, I believe, with Mohammedans. And again, in a sense, therefore, it is true that this great supreme being, the conception of whom has been innate in the minds of the Ashanti, is the Jehovah of the Israelites. Mixed religion. In the very fact that the Hebrews, despite their service of the true God, frequently relapsed into idolatry, as I stated, guys, Captain Rattray finds a parallelism with the Ashanti where, as Bozeman noted, one finds a belief in a supreme being side by side with multitudes of their idol gods. The captain continues, as will be seen presently, every Ashanti temple is a pantheon in which repose the shrines of the gods, but the power or spirit that on occasions enters into these shrines of the gods, but the power of the spirit, I lost my place, that on occasion enter into these shrines is directly or indirectly derived from the one God of the sky, whose intermediaries they are. Okay, so it seems like these many gods were probably fallen angels or angels that they have started to worship, or gods of the Canaanites and Egyptians that they may have integrated. Israel was always getting in trouble for that. Okay, hence we have in Ashanti exactly that mixed religion which we find among the Israelites of old. They worship Jehovah, but they worship other gods as well. Professor George Foot Moore, treating of the character of Judaism after declaring the foundation of Judaism is the belief that religion is revealed and that there could be but one religion properly deserving the name, for God is one, and revelation was not only consistent but identical throughout, for God is ever the same, shows that in practice at times the forefathers had fallen away from the true religion, not only by worshiping other gods and by worshiping their own God in a heathenism way, but by tolerating injustice and immorality. And yet, nevertheless, this serious infraction of the law in no way affected the religion itself, which was perfect from the beginning and therefore unalterable. R.L. Otley has summed up this seemingly paradoxical condition of things. He writes, the Hebrews did not indeed openly abandon their allegiance to Jehovah, but they coordinated and sometimes even identified their national deity with one or other of the gods of Canaan. And thus, the simple and pure worship of Jehovah was gradually corrupted by the admixtures of usages and symbols borrowed from the nature worship of the Canaanites. But let us go into this question a little more in detail. Hebrew monotheism. The condition of Israel then was not idolatrous in the strict sense of the word, viz. The absolute cult of a false god. Vigoro makes this clear when he says the children of Israel who sacrificed to idols did so through frailty, through passion, but these infidelities of the chosen people, these adulteries, as the prophets call them in their forcible language, however culpable they were, nevertheless did not change the nature of the religion proper of Israel. King Solomon affords us the type of the weak and inconstant child of Jacob. He knows the unity of God, he confesses it and praises it in chant. And despite all this, yielding to ignoble weakness, he prostrates himself before shameful idols. The same author elsewhere quotes approvingly the words of F. Pratt. The idolatry of the Hebrews was less an apostasy than the adoption of strange practices or ceremonies. One did not abjure Jehovah, who remained the only legitimate God of Israel, but by impulse or through interest, one associated with his worship what he reproved. Divided service. This state of affairs is well illustrated in the reign of the reformer King Hosea, when the priests of the high places came not up to the altar of the Lord in Jerusalem, but only ate of the unleavened bread among their brethren. Hosea, according to the scriptures' account, was slain at Megiddo by the Pharaoh Necho about 610 BC, and was succeeded by his son Joachaz, who after a reign of only 3 months was dethroned by the Pharaoh Necho and carried into Egypt, where he died. As the Babylonian captivity began about 585 BC, the religious condition of the Hebrews was most deplorable just at this period. So understand, just as I opened up with the teaching, that those various names of God showed you that the Bantus all had the same idea of the same God and had variations of name in Yami, in Zambi, right? In the Zambi, right? So they were the same, but depending on where they came in, which exodus they entered into West Africa determined the changes of the names, right? So, the ones who came in during the Assyrian captivity probably called the father a different name than those who came during the Babylonian captivity versus those who came after the 70 AD, which is Judah. Okay, but we see that there is a tie to what we see in the Bible, which is Yah or Yahweh or Yahuwah, right? There's a tie to that in the name Yami. Okay, there's a direct tie in all the other names, like in Zambi, or variations of that. So, Rattray's views. That Captain Rattray has no preconceived notions which he was trying to substantiate, and was in reality entirely oblivious of the fact that his very words indicate a connection between the supreme being of the Ashanti and the Yahweh of the Hebrews, is shown from the personal letter written from Mapon on May 5th, 1925, wherein he differs with my view of the matter, saying, "I am afraid I can't follow you in any attempt to trace Hebrew affinities in race and language, though he admits many curious parallels certainly exist." Later, however, after further correspondence on the subject, he apparently modifies his view somewhat when he writes again from Mapon on October 5th, 1925. "I am so wholly ignorant about all things Hebrew that I am never in a position to trace and to follow up possible clues to your theory of the possible Semitic origins of some of the Ashanti customs. I am aware, of course, that such a possibility has been suggested many times. However, even with my scrappy information on the subject, I have been struck with curious little points such as the 40-day periods, etc. Then, with his characteristic modesty, he remarks, "All I can do to help scholars like yourself is to record accurately what I find here." So he wasn't aware of the Hebrew traditions. He was noting the Ashanti traditions, and it turns out that they match Hebrew traditions. And a lot of people didn't like that. So in other words, these Europeans, just by these guys' research, they knew who they were taking from the very beginning. They knew who they were taking as slaves from the very beginning. The final enslavement of the children of Israel, the true children of Israel, the true descendants of Jacob. That my knowledge is limited to the Ashanti is possibly all for the best, for I do not bring in preconceived notions and theories which might unconsciously influence my work. Before closing, he adds, "I think you are possibly on the right track, but we have to be extra extraordinarily careful not to be too ready to jump to conclusions from what may, after all, be just one or others of those strange coincidences which crop up in the comparison of any two languages of people. Okay, so maybe the other guy didn't understand the Shanti traditions as well as Rattray. Okay, but he understood Hebrew and was saying, hey, what's going on here? You know, you can't make assumptions. So let's get into Ashanti Yami. Keeping this warning in mind, we may now approach the consideration of our subject in somewhat of a critical spirit. The full name of the Supreme Being among the Ashanti is Anyame. But in conversation, the nominal prefix O is generally elided, and we usually find the word even in writing Yame. A being pronounced as in bat, yat, bat, Yami, and E as in met. Moreover, the prefix N, which is placed before the verbs to form nouns that convey the idea of immensity or numbers collectively or in the abstract, would leave as the significant part of the word Yami, Yami, Yahmeh, Yahuwah, Yahweh, right? So let's continue. It's an interesting book here. Everyone should have it. Now, on the one hand, we have no less an authority than Professor Albert T. Clay of Yale University that some Semites used M and others W to represent the same sound. So even though it was Yame, some groups used the W instead of the M, okay, as far as the sound goes. So it may be translated as Yahmeh or Yahweh. And on the other hand, Captain Rattray assures me that in Ashanti, the letter M interchanges with W and quotes Chrysler as confirmatory authority. So Chrysler reaffirmed this position of Rattray's that the M can easily be interchanged with the W. So the people of the Ashan or the Akan people called him Yami. The Gentiles and others sometimes translate that as Yahweh or Yahweh, right? This establishes a surprising similarity between Ashanti Yami and the Hebrew Tetragrammaton Yahweh. Do you understand? I mean, you Gentiles, you understand the deception that Satan has put on the world and deceives the whole world, and how Satan enslaved God's people one more time and had the whole world think that they are Hamites when they are the children of Israel? This is what we're seeing right here. The Catholic Church is the main architect behind all of this. They are not children of Yah. They usurped it under Constantine. They usurped the beliefs of the Hebrews and the belief of Christ and made a religion of it to deceive the world. This is the architects of this whole thing is Rome. And the fact that the latter is commonly regarded as having been derived from the verb haya, to be, which in turn has an equivalent in Ashanti ya, also meaning to be, only strengthens the presumption that the one was derived from the other, or that both came from the same Shemitic root. So we have a Shemitic language. How you like that? Identification with Yahweh. Furthermore, among the attributes of the Shanti, Yami stands out, bore bore, meaning creator, the exact equivalent in sound and signification with the participle bore of the Hebrew verb bara, to create again. See the ties in the language, same meaning. We have more evidence of being Hebrew than the fake Jews do. Yami is called Yakopan, signifying Yami alone, great one. So that's what Yakopan means. So the father's name is Yami. Yakopan, meaning the translation is Yami alone, the Great One. He is the Most High. To whom Saturday is dedicated, right? Did I miss that? Let me go back. Sorry. Yami alone, the Great One, and Yakopan Kwame, which means Yami alone, Great One, to whom Saturday is dedicated. So Saturday is dedicated to Yami. Saturday is dedicated to the Most High. The Sabbath day is dedicated to the Most High. This is the Ashanti culture and the Bantu people, which is assuredly an easy equivalent for the Lord of the Sabbath. How you like that? We might even draw a confirmatory argument from the fact that Yami has the prefix in, which would imply that it is a collective noun, as we have already noted. For just as we find the Hebrew, the plural form Elohim, when the supreme being is indicated, so the same general principle would apparently here assert itself in the Ashanti concept in this use of the collective noun. In both instances, perhaps there is a veiled reference to the Trinity by implication. And what is even more strange, while the accepted rule in Ashanti is that descriptive nouns are generally compounded of a verb with the prefix o and the suffix fo to imply personality, in the present instance, the personal suffix is wanting, as if the traditional concept of the Trinity precluded the idea of a single personality from Yami. Testimony of Queen Mothers. That the present-day Ashanti themselves regard their tribal god as identical with the one true God of Christendom, who is in reality the Yahweh of the Hebrews, is clear from the address of the Queen Mothers that accompanied the silver stool which they presented to Viscountess Lascelles as a wedding present. The letter appeared in full in the previous chapter, but we may be permitted to repeat here a single passage that is much to our purpose, and we pray the great God Yakopan, on whom men lean and do not fall, whose day of worship is a Saturday, and whom the Ashanti serve just as she serves him, that he may give the king's child and her husband long life and happiness. Rattray's argument. Well then, did Captain Rattray write in 1914? In Ashanti, in remote bush villages buried away in impenetrable forest, and as yet even untouched by European and missionary influence, it would seem incredible that the Christian idea of a one and supreme being should, if a foreign element of only some 200 or 300 years' growth, have taken such deep root as to affect their folklore, traditions, customs, and the very sayings and proverbs with which their language abounds. These proverbs and traditions, moreover, which speak of and contain references to a supreme being, are far more commonly known among the graybeards, elders, and the fetish priestly class themselves than among the rising younger generation, grown up among the new influences and often trained in the very precincts of a mission. Fetishism and monotheism would at first sight appear the very antithesis of each other, but a careful investigation of fact will show that here in Ashanti it is not so. Ashanti Proverbs. Among the proverbs adduced by Rattray are the following: of all the wide earth, Yami is the elder. If you wish to tell anything to Yakopan, God the Most High, tell it to the winds. The hawk says, all things that Yami made are beautiful. I who lie on my back looking upwards do not see Yakopan, God Most High. So what do you expect who are sprawling on your belly? Because Yakopan did not wish any bad words, he gave a name to each thing one by one. The words that Yami had beforehand ordained a human being does not alter. If Yami gives you sickness, he gives you medicine. It is Yami who pounds the fufu for the one without arms. All men are the children of Yami. No one is a child of earth. Sounds like the Bible. Priest of Yami. Despite the assertion of Ellis already quoted that the deity whom he calls Nana Yakopan had no temple and priesthood, Rattray positively proves the contrary and shows moreover that the priests of Yami are dedicated to him for life. Levitical priesthood, right? The ceremony of dedication requires that white clay be smeared in 3 lines on parts of the head, arms, and chest. The prayer of invocation being Yakopan Kwame, Huhuri Ini O God Kwame, whose day of service is Saturday. This is your white clay life to our master. After this ceremony, the priest must sleep in the Yamidan temple of the sky god for 8 nights. The candidate for the priesthood must spend 3 years of novitiate in preparation for the office, and it is during his 3rd year of training that he utters a prayer containing these words: Supreme Being, who alone is great, it is you who begat me. And there is common sayings among the Ashanti. No priest may look upon the face of his God and live, which sounds remarkably like an echo of Yahweh's warning to Moses at Mount Sinai. Thou canst not see my face, for man shall not see me and live. Redeemer. One Ashanti proverb is particularly striking. The Creator created death only for death to kill him. How you like that? Those who don't believe in Jesus. On which Rattray comments, this saying illustrates in a wonderful epigrammatical manner the power of death. But does it not rather resemble either a Christian reference to Calvary, or else a prophetic utterance worthy of Isaiah or some other of the ancient Hebrew prophets? Takora. In connection with the same concept of Redeemer, we might call attention to Tano, or Takora, the greatest of the Ashanti gods upon earth. He has a material element about him, and yet is considered as the son of the supreme God. And we find his invocation, Takora, that great spirit which is everywhere, according to Captain Rattray, who had requested the priest to make him a new shrine. This answer to his request came supposedly from Tano himself, but thought the priest who appeared, or at least feigned to be in a trance, I am not named Korah because I am old, a Korah, an old man, but I am called Takora. If it be that anything is spoiled, I mend it, Korah to mend. Now, if he had come to me and said that something of his was spoiled, and had asked me to mend it, then had I seen the path clear. But he says that I must take one of my sons and give him, but that I am unable to do. In my own being, I am the Son of God. And if any of my grandchildren say that the white man loves me and has drawn near to me, I too shall stand behind him. Only after the beginning of the 19th century was there a shrine for Takora, which is abbreviated for Tano Korah or Tano the Mender. Prior to that date, he was supposed to dwell in a cave near the source of the river Tano. Ashanti myth. Once more, let us quote from Rattray. There is known from one end of Ashanti to the other a popular myth, which I shall here only outline very briefly. It gives in simple and childish form the very basis of Ashanti theological beliefs. This myth recounts how Yami, the sky god, had various sons, of whom one in particular was a Bayiyere favorite son. Yami decided to send these children of his down to the earth in order that they might receive benefits from and confer them upon mankind. All these sons bore the names of what are now rivers and lakes. Shemitic heathenism. In speaking of what he termed Shemitic heathenism, Robert Smith declares it was the community and not the individual that was sure of the permanent and unfailing help of the deity. It was a national, not a personal providence that was taught by ancient religion. So much was this the case that in purely personal concerns, the ancients were very apt to turn not to the recognized religion of the family or of the state, but to a magical superstition. Ashanti Religion. Just some such conditions of affairs, it would seem, characterize the tribal religion of the Ashanti, at least in practice, for even independent of the superstitions of Obeah, under the heading of the Ashanti belief in non-human spiritual powers, we find Captain Rattray stating, in the latter category are included all deities from the Supreme Being, Yami, or Inyakopan, God the Most High, who dwells somewhere aloof in his firmament, down to those to whom he delegates some of his powers, as his vice-regents upon earth. There are the lesser gods, which I would assume may be angels, who in their turn are graded in a regular descending scale until they reach, or at times almost merge into, that class which the Shantis themselves name Suma, who are the lowest grades of superhuman powers. I have given elsewhere some accounts of ceremonies which afford us examples of animism in its simpler form. In another place, Captain Rattray writes, yet again, unless we understand the full significance underlying that aspect of Ashanti religion, which enjoins that the spirits and memories of famous ancestors be venerated and propitiated, we cannot fully grasp what a calamity in the Ashanti mind the extinction of his clan entails. The same overmastering desire that the family should be perpetuated made sterility a seeming curse among the ancient Hebrews. To their ancestors too did they pay veneration and respect, though not to such a degree, it is true, as do the Ashanti. Yami of Yahweh. For the present, then, we feel safe in concluding that whatever its source of enlightenment, whether by direct tradition, effected by a considerable infiltration of Hebrew stock, or through instruction of missionaries in Christian times, the supreme being of Ashanti is identical with the God of the Christians, the Yahweh of Old Testament, and further, that their tribal worship is strangely parallel to that of the divided worship that existed in Jerusalem immediately prior to Babylonian exile, as we will see later more in detail. In this connection, and by way of further proof that in all probability the Ashanti Yame is but another form of the Hebrew Yahweh, it is interesting to quote from Professor Clay, who assures us that in the Murusu archives found in Nippur belonging to the reign of Artaxerxes and Darius, the divine element in Hebrew names is written Jama for Jawa. Clay also mentions a tablet found in Tanukh, which contains the divine name of Israel's God, written Jami. Nor can it be objected that in view of the Hebraic prohibition against the use of the divine name, the common invocation of Yami among the Ashanti militates against our theory. For Courtleoner assures us that it was only after the Babylonian captivity that the pronouncing of the Tetragrammaton was prohibited. Consequently, the most that could be implied would be that whatever Hebraic cultural influence may have reached the Ashanti must probably trace its origin back to pre-Babylonian Hebrews, the original Hebrews. And this is precisely what he hopes to establish before close of the present work. altar to Yami. Among the stamp patterns of the Ashanti clothes recently reproduced by Rattray, there is one of the rather striking designs known as Yami Dua, or Altar of Yami. If we may conceive in the case of the mosaic altar of sacrifice the horns at the corner being turned in and not outward, the visualization of the one visualization of the one from the other becomes easy. Breastplate. But before leaving this subject, we must refer to what may well be regarded as a possible vestige of the office of the Jewish high priest to be found among the Ashanti, something the people in the land of Israel do not have. Ellis relates how in 1881, when messengers came to Mr. Griffith, the lieutenant governor of the Gold Coast, while relations between Ashanti and the British were strained, that official, apparently through ignorance of local customs, asked them how he was to know that they really came from the king of the Ashanti. They pointed to the gold plates on their breasts as being their insignia of office. We have a remarkable sketch of this breastplate, which appeared originally in the Illustrated London News and was reproduced without any acknowledgement by Sir Henry Stanley in his volume entitled Kamasi and Magdala. It is inscribed Ashanti ambassadors crossing the Pra. The breastplate on the central figure, the herald, who is called by Stanley the town crier, is strikingly similar to the breastplate of the high priest among the ancient Hebrews, even to its division into 12 parts. Mishnafet. The headdress of the herald, too, with its gold disc in front, satisfies the description of the Mishnafet as given in the Jewish Encyclopedia. A tiara, or perhaps a peculiarly wound turban with a peak, the front of which bore a gold plate with the inscription, Holy unto Yah. Vestige of the high priest. At first glance, this would appear to be unquestionably the vestige of the high priest of the Hebrews, but it is well remembered that Professor Clay holds that the breastplate was not peculiar to the Hebrews. It was to be found as well in Egypt and probably elsewhere. However, the division of the breastplate into 12 parts is certainly distinctive. So also is the headdress with the gold disc in front. Gribobodia. In this connection, it is interesting to note how Sir James George Fraser records, among the Grebo people of Sierra Leone, there is a pontiff who bears the title of Bodia and has been compared on somewhat. So here's that image. You've seen it before, okay, with that high priest, with the breastplate, right, with the 12 jewels. Who has it? The Negro, the Ashanti, the true Hebrew Israelite. Okay. Slender grounds to the high priest of the Jews. He is appointed in accordance with the behest of an oracle. At an elaborate ceremony of installation, he is anointed. A ring is put on his ankle as a badge of office, and the doorposts of his house are sprinkled with the blood of a sacrificed goat. He has charge of the public talismans and idols, which he feeds with rice and oil every new moon, and he sacrifices in behalf of the town, to the dead, and to demons. Naturally, Sir James accentuates the somewhat slender grounds on which the tradition rests, but his mere admission that such a tradition has any foundation at all is greatly to our present purpose. But now let us return to the Ashanti official with his breastplate and peculiar headdress with its golden disc. Ashanti Asine, the word for crier, or more properly herald, in Ashanti is Osine. According to Rattray, The Ashanti have a myth which states that the creator made a herald, Osine, a drummer, Okyerima, and an executioner, Obrafo, and that the precedence of these officials in the Ashanti court is in that order. Can this have any reference to the beginning of the Mosaic revelation from the burning bush? The word bush in Hebrew is sene, which might possibly indicate the origin of the Ashanti Osine. How you like that? The herald, after dropping the prefix O, the drummer Okyerima, again dropping the nominal prefix O, might then be derived from Koreb, the western height of Sinai. And the executioner, Obrafo, after dropping the prefix O and the nominal suffix fo, might be derived from Breath, a covenant or alliance. The Shanti myth might thus record progressive stages in the manifestation of Yahweh to the Hebrews. The burning bush Sinai and the covenant that established the nation as God's chosen people. The drum history of Mapon declares the creator made something. What did he make? He made the herald. He made the drummer. He made the Kwawukawa, the chief executioner. They all declare that they came from one Atepad, Tabina. Come hither, O herald, and receive your black monkey skin cap. What was your heritage? Your heritage was a good master. Your heritage was the death dance Atopere. That the office of Ashanti herald may possibly have some distant relationship with the high priesthood of the ancient Hebrews might be further indicated by some of his privileges and duties. Thus, Captain Rattray records, it is always the herald's privilege to drink first from the wine cup, before the king, before any chief, and even before the spirits themselves. And again, a herald's duty also included that of town sanitary inspector and tax gatherer on the main crossroads where tolls and duties are collected for the king of the Ashanti. 12 tribes. Once more, have the 12 divisions of the breastplate anything to do with the tradition recorded by Baudic and extended by Beacom, that the Ashanti and allied peoples were originally derived from 12 tribes or families? Another possible indication of some affinity with the 12 tribes of Israel. In this connection, while speaking of the Ashanti and kindred tribes, Friedrich Ratzel asserts without hesitation there are 12 stocks, the members of which are distributed promiscuously throughout these tribes, however remote they may be in situation or politically separated. Perhaps, however, the basis is not in all cases common descent, but the servants may have been a subject class, as the Alpong clan, into which the Portuguese are adopted, embraces the trading people. This, however, is merely a conjecture, but it deserves consideration. With equal assurance, while discussing totemism, these beliefs, there is a strong resemblance to those prevailing in Egypt, where the tutelary deity of each nome or province was thought to be incarnate in the animal or plant, etc., after which it was named. And he adds, the Hebrew tribes also had animal standards. In this last statement, for which he adduces neither proof or reference, he is certainly at odds with Robertson Smith, no mean authority on the subject, and who states positively, on the other hand, it may be argued with more plausibility that totemism, if it ever did exist, disappeared when the Semites emerged from savagery, which was certainly long before the days of Abraham, even were we inclined to admit that the Shemites actually did evolve from savagery. Okay, guys, so I'm going to end it there. And I find this very interesting. I recommend that you download this book from archive.org and add it to your collection and read it. It is extremely valuable and a good read. So if you like what we do, please support us at TEOTW channel, right? Patreon.com/TEOTW. And for Cash App, $ TEOTW 7101. Peace and blessing, Israel. Your captivity is ending.